Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third evening of the 2024 Summer Session at the Buddhist Study Center. Our week-long session may be attended in person or online. The program is being recorded, so if you do not want to be recorded, please turn your camera off. Also, please mute yourself throughout the session. If you have any questions, you may write it in chat, or those in person may write it on their cards and turn them in. We will have a 45-minute Dharma talk by Reverend Dr. Kenji Akahoshi and a Q&A followed by a 40-minute Dharma talk by Reverend Akahoshi and another Q&A. We will open this evening's session with Gail Tagashira from Hawaii Betsuing, who will be our MC this morning, along with Reverend Sol Kalu. So you're lucky because we have two MCs this evening. So now I'll have Gail introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Carolyn. For those of you joining us for the first time, our sensei is Reverend Kenji Akahoshi. Kenji Sensei is a retired minister of the Buddhist Temple of San Diego since 2021. He now leads the ministerial support pillar for the Dharma Forward campaign and gives classes for the minister assistants of the Buddhist Churches of America. He has had recent articles in Tricycle Buddhist Magazine and Lion's Roar. He is also writing a book which interprets Shin Buddhism in a way that is relevant in 21st century America. A dentist by profession, Reverend Dr. Akahoshi earned a degree from the University of California at San Francisco Dental School before finishing his master's from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, then a master's from the Institute of Buddhist Studies for the ministerial path. Tonight's topic is, Who Am I in the World? My Authentic Self. Reverend Dr. Akahoshi.
Thank you very much, Gail. Good evening again. And so may we begin again with the recitation of Nembutsu. So please join me in Gassho. Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namandas, Namandas. Well, it's good to be here again. One of the things I do, and I confuse people when I got to San Diego, we have this kind of ritual, I think, in America that I don't think they do in Japan, where the leader, our sensei, says Namo Amida Butsu, and it's a call and response 3 times. I asked our Sangha in San Diego, I just say it 3 times very quickly, so it confuses people. I think the Nembutsu is very personal and private, and so just to say it as loud or as quietly as you want, as quickly or as slowly. So it would confuse people because I would say, Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, and people are waiting for that silence, you know. So I may or may not do it. I get confused when I'm at different places and realize that people may be used to that call and response thing. But one of my things is to really clarify the primary teaching of Shin Buddhism. And as Gail said, we're writing a book, and I'm calling it a primer on Shin Buddhism, because my intent has been to develop an entry level. And what we've been doing here, and this is what I need your input with, is a process. And we started off with an exercise or a practice. So I do want your feedback on how that works. And with this process, we learn what truth is, which is a very big word, and I tried to define that, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And today we're talking about the self, because a lot of times in Buddhism you talk about knowing the self, and Dogen has this whole thing about the self. And yet in Shin Buddhism we don't seem to say very much about it. And yet I think it's very important. So that's what we'll try to develop today. And tomorrow we'll talk about the benefits of being in a Jodo Shinshu Sangha or temple, preferably a temple, but if you're far from it, then now we have the internet, so that would be an advantage. And then Friday, hopefully bringing us all together and talk about the spirituality. And again, something that's sort of vague, and this is why we talked about truth on the second day, that there are what I would consider two levels. There are many other levels, but for our purposes, thinking about truth in two levels will help us think about spirituality in several levels. One, the conventional level, everyday life, and then a deeper level. But I think for a Shin Buddhist, that's combined at the practical level, bringing in spirituality with everyday life. So to start off with tonight, I want to again review what we did Monday because, and I think I reiterated why I think that's so important. So let me ask what your experiences has been, if you hadn't done it the first time, if you did it yesterday or in between, to share that. Or I might ask, how many people actually did try or think about doing a practice, saying, okay, can I see the hands? Just kind of, okay. Would some people like to share, what their experience was? And the microphone, do we have a running? Yeah, we may have to pass that around. I think you just rip it off.
Hi, Jen Connie,
Hi.
Women
Yeah.
Buddhist Temple. I'm going to share, and it's not a success story.
No, good.
It's hard. This is hard to do. So the first day, you told us Monday to do it. So Tuesday, yesterday, I just completely got up, rush, go to work. You're just busy, busy, busy. Totally forgot. When you asked about it, I'm like, oh, yeah. So I set my alarm before I went to bed. So shortly after I got up, it said, gratitude. And so I remembered right then. So I was grateful for my toothbrush and everything that went into my electric toothbrush that I like. And, all that that's the kind of thing. And then I got busy and forgot. And then I was driving and I'm like, oh, yeah, gratitude. So I was grateful for my car. I even thought about Henry Ford. I drive a Ford truck. And I thought, back in the Ford, a little T-model Ford. And then I'm like, wow, your mind just starts going. When you say thank you for something and start thinking about all that made that thing, it's endless. It's endless. So then I shifted. I was thankful for my children and things like that, and it put me in a good mood. While I was driving, there was traffic. I didn't care. I was grateful for just the whole thing and being able to have a job and go to blah 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 blah. And then I got to work, and until you just said something again, I had totally forgotten. This is not an easy thing to keep in mind. So
thank you for sharing that. And something alerted me, and it brings me back to my dentist days. I don't brush my teeth first thing in the morning. I don't know if many of you do. The reason is I do a good job at night. You all brush at night before you sleep. So, and I would tell my patients this. Yeah, why do you brush in the morning? There's nothing to clean. So I rinse my mouth out. If you want to use mouthwash, that's fine. But I brush after breakfast. That's when there's food there. So at least between breakfast and lunch or whatever snack comes up in between, that's what you're doing. So again, just a little tidbit from my other past life, that if you're doing a good job at night, there's nothing to clean first thing in the morning. Just rinse or use a mouthwash and then brush after breakfast. And so, and you could alert your dentist if...
Reverend Bert, do you agree?
Other people, please share as far as how this exercise did go or didn't go, or what your thoughts were about it. I saw some hands going up, so just share, whether, in your thoughts about it. It is hard, and or even if you didn't do it, why was it difficult to do? Hello. And then please. Yes, Steve.
Well, I wasn't here Monday and Tuesday physically, although I was on Zoom. But I understand what you were asking everyone to do and the reasoning behind it. As Jen said, it's hard to remember to do it, and I haven't. But what I do regularly is at the end of the day, if I'm not crashed out, I will write down 3 things that I'm thankful for. And I think that's a practice that many people do nowadays. It's become sort of like a mainstream thing to do, to appreciate and to have gratitude for anything. Just thinking about 3 things during the day that happen.
Yes.
And you write down, oh, I'm grateful that blah, 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 blah. And I like that.
Okay, great. Others, anyone else want to share something that they might do every day, or something that they keep in mind? Okay, I spend a lot of time on this, and the reason is, in Buddhism, as I said, it's body, mind, feelings, experience, spirit. It's everything. It's our total being. And part of the objective of these classes, like the many classes we've had, is to have people really grasp the experience of Shin Buddhism. And I make a distinction between understanding and experience. When we understand something, it's in our mind. That's a good idea. It feels good. But experience is much deeper. Experiencing involves our whole body and being and feelings and so forth. And since Buddhism really involves our whole being, what is it in Shin Buddhism that we do as a practice? I was in a group of ministers over a dozen years ago, and half a dozen of us. And ministers weren't clear on what our Jodo Shinshu practice is. And this is why I make such effort on trying to get people to do something. And it's fine to have one of these things at night or in the morning, and we can talk about doing gasho in the morning, actually at meals and so forth. But I'm really looking at the life patterns of our Issei, Nisei, and people in Japan. Again, in Japan, it's all over. It's the environment, so you don't have to think about it. You're bowing all the time, humility. Okage-sama de, I am fine because of you. There's Enyo, people line up, they keep things clean. It's in the environment. But here in America, we do have to develop something. So the other question I have is, what do you do now that didn't take a practice? When we drive a car, did you practice playing an instrument? And did you just pick up an instrument and start playing? I mentioned in 3rd or 4th grade I had a plastic flute. Doesn't look like a saxophone, but the keys were similar, and I started to read music. Sport, did you just start making 3-pointers like Stephen Curry? So everything is taken to practice. And this thank you seems kind of Mickey, gee, I can't think about it. It is hard. But unless we start to practice, and this is where I think we hear Dharma talks, we may come every Sunday and their value and things like that, or seminars, we understand a lot. But unless we put it into a practice, the words that we're talking about, this week, next week will be, oh yeah, what did that guy talk about? But if there's a practice, you're incorporating something. And in BCA, we have our logo, BCA. It says a life of gratitude. And gratitude is one of the basic things. And I think I pointed out it leads to many other things. Cicero said something like, gratitude is the greatest of all virtues because it is the parent of all others. And so it's the opening gate of Nembutsu. It's not Nembutsu. I had a minister say, thank you is not Nembutsu. I know that, but we have to have a beginning. And I think we say, say Nembutsu all the time. Well, if we can't say thank you every day all the time, how are we going to get to that second step? So I really encourage you for the next few days, because I'll be harping on you the next couple of days, and it is difficult to remember. And that's why I call it, that Eightfold Path in reverse. First thing is meditation. Think about what am I going to be grateful for today? And in mindfulness, you have to keep that in mind, because by the time you get to the car and so forth, it's gone. I'm late for work. I got to get going, And then it does take effort. And then livelihood is during your work or school or whatever you do that day, that has to be mindful in actually doing something. When you come to a faucet, you're turning it on. And, that's conduct. And then saying thank you, and then thinking, oh, yeah, the thought, and then the perspective. How did this water get here? And, of course, you may not do that all the time, but, again, I say we start everything in a very concentrated, artificial way. Playing that little recorder, which fingers was it, and how do I breathe, and all these things. And then after a while, it becomes very natural. Like I was talking about driving a car. Well, in those days, you had to drive a stick shift and, do the brake and all that. But now, I guess with some of these Teslas, I don't even know how to turn on. When I got into some of these rental cars, a few years ago, it was like, gee, I got the key, but how do you turn this thing on and off? And then it has all the directions and it talks to you. Hello, drive carefully. But everything seems very, tedious at the beginning. And playing a sport is just, gee, this is really awkward. The coach said to do this, but I feel better just doing it like that. Then after a while, you find out that the coach was right. It is better to hold the bat like this. And then after a while, it just becomes natural in a lot of things. So this thank you is artificial. We have to think about it. And it's, why is this, I'm saying this to do throughout the day? Because it shifts your mentality. Because our day, as natural creatures, we're looking out for danger. We're watching all the clouds of despair, danger. And so we say, oh, traffic's terrible, politics and listening to the radio, things aren't working. And yet you can think, these highways are pretty good. Politics is lousy, but we have a government that kind of works. And so, again, Chinran is looking at the light beneath the clouds. And this is where we don't have to control our ego and be better and achieve. And we realize that we've been receiving all these things. And so we'll get to that today on, what that means, what to say after thank you. So anyway, tomorrow we'll have another quiz. Now, what about yesterday, the 2 levels of truth? Oh, we have a question, yes. Since Monday, I am more mindful of being more humble in relating to all beings around me, living or non-living things. Great, thank you, Purdy. Yeah, it really wakes us up. And that's what Buddhism is about, waking up. We are mindful of things. So thank you. Now, the second day, the first day, just doing a practice, as I said, it's kind of Japanese way. If you want to become a carver, like carving the divine, fine, you want to be a carver, here's a broom. Go sweep the floor, go clean the toilet. And you're thinking, no, I want to be an artist. No, first couple of years, you're just doing the cleanup. But if you stay with it, then you begin to learn that this discipline is necessary for the other work. And in Japan, they have that mentality of staying with it. In America, the kid quits in a week. Gee, I'm just sweeping the floor. I'm not, designing things. I'm not being an engineer. So there is a difference, and it does take some effort to stay with something at the basic level. And again, for Nembutsu, I think it's gratitude. So on Tuesday, we talked about this thing called truth. And of course, that's a big deal, And the reason I put that in is that we're always talking about truth, what's truthful, what's not, and so forth. But there is an area, we can call it deep truth, that it's almost not worth talking about. It's like that, looking out at the galaxies. That how do we argue about that? Are there a billion galaxies or, half a billion galaxies? Does a dog have Buddha nature? Then moo, That's not our problem. I've got this arrow stuck in me, and I'm not going to decide whether it's a willow branch or a goose feather. I got to take the arrow out. And I got to do that within 100 years. And so this is where I bring that discussion in, because there is that level of truth, the conventional level, where we can talk about. But we have to realize that truth is like the ocean, and I have the right truth because I'm looking out the right porthole, and you're looking out the wrong porthole. And what we have to realize is that we each have a little porthole we're looking out, and we think we know the whole ocean. And none of us can look out that same porthole and see the same thing. And so this truth. So comments on that, on what we talked about yesterday, on the truth, because that's a gigantic thing, and religions are supposed to be about truth, and whether this religion is right and that isn't. Any comments on our thoughts on truth and how we were trying to describe it, or questions on it? Yeah. This is supposed to be a group discussion. Who has the microphone? Oh, Gail? Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
I always feel like if you start, it breaks the ice.
Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah, thank you.
authentic and
Yes.
imperfect self, then it's fine. Just for me, what you said and what I've been working on, but it really brought it home, is when you think of truth that way, for me, it's already made me more patient when at home. I have an adult son and adult daughter, and I find that I'm looking at them differently because everybody thinks I'm still mommy. So all the troubles, all the problems, all the whatever, they come to me. I'm going to fix it. I'm like, you're not a little kid and I'm putting a Band-Aid on your knee anymore. You're an adult. And they're like, no, you're mommy. And they tease me, but they really want me to try to fix things. And I'm just noticing that instead of thinking or saying, something like, come on, you can do this or something, I'm just watching and I'm like, oh, I see that. My son was really frustrated. He had an issue that he needed to fix and he couldn't get a hold of somebody on the phone, and he was just trying to get a hold of a credit card company to say something about something being wrong. And he was so frustrated, he came to me. And I said, I'm trying to get ready for work, and I think if you just stick with this, you're going to be fine. I can't do it for you. And I said, I see you're really frustrated. And that's how I left it. And I just saw that, and I didn't judge him, because sometimes you want to think, oh my God, in your head, even though you don't say it to them. And other
Right.
things that end up working, whatever, you're like, oh, what is going on? Come on, you can, but I didn't even have that. I just saw that, he was struggling a bit. And I just kind of observed, and I didn't judge. And I was like, and I knew where it came from. I said, wow, everybody has their own perspective, is looking out of their own, I actually thought about it, their own little porthole. Mm-hmm. And his porthole at the time was devastating, and mine was fine. I remembered to say, thank you when I brushed my teeth about my toothbrush. I was already in a good mood. So it's just really simple what you said, but it's really, really helpful. So if I can keep this perspective, maybe I'll be more patient with myself too.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share? Yeah, Dr. Warren.
Yes, well, I'll share that. I think you answered my question yesterday, last evening, when we talked about your truth. Because I mentioned that if you watch the news, you can see that one person says, this is the truth, and the other person says, oh, no, this is the truth. And how do we parse through the truth? Because there is, I think, in our experience, we see this is the truth. This is the truth. So obviously, one is less true than the other, I guess you might say. But I think what you explained to me is that sometimes when people say, yeah, this is the truth, it's not the truth, it's what they believe, it's their belief. And so I think I'm a little more comfortable with the meaning even of the concept of truth. It's really, sometimes it's not the truth really, it's what people believe.
Right. And I think what's surprising, especially to me, is that there's a large segment of the population where belief, and it shouldn't be surprising because that's how humankind has been. Belief is a strong part of what leads their life without evidence. And yet, especially from the 20th century, we look at evidence and we call it science because all science does is validate what is seen. And science changes when there's more progress. And as I said, in dentistry, and I'm sure in medicine, the more you can see, the more you realize, oh, I was not, I had a decision that was right at this level, but when I have magnification and see detail, oh, there's a deeper truth. Part of what we're trying to do, and the reason I bring this up, is that as we work through Shin, I think we'll be revealing things that we thought were true that are not. And I bring that up with this achieving and receiving. I think most of us have an attitude, it's just out there that you should achieve something. And so what we know is that to get somewhere, you have to achieve something. I've got to do it. Well, that is true, but with our little exercise, did we not get the experience that we were receiving so much? And so this is where I say this is, for our young people, to have them realize that they're receiving so much that they're not acknowledging. And that one thing, when people say I don't need, Shin Buddhism to make my way through life, showing that this truth of receiving is more true than achieving. There's a balance, but we're kind of neglecting or ignoring the fact that we've received so much. And after tonight, I'll work through some of that also. But that's a large truth, that instead of thinking that I've done it myself, we acknowledge the fact that there are others who have helped us. And you hear that often, Academy Awards and so forth. They're always, they got 30 seconds and they take a minute to thank all the people. But if this is occurring throughout the day, does that change the way we interact with people? Because we are receiving this support. It may be a job for some people, but it is a reality that people are supporting me. And so people have supported me in the past that I don't even know, who have created, institutions or educational models and things like that support my life. So this is where I bring up this truth and this shift in reality. Yeah, Ellen?
I understood, I think, from the previous lecture that we talked about that we all have our own reality. Is that what you mean by truth? When because of our life experiences, we define our own reality,
in
and
a
so
way,
therefore that becomes our truth, right?
Yeah.
But through a Jodo Shinshu concept, perspective, we're looking at something else. It's the awakening to interdependence and awakening to impermanence and things like that, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I understand that correctly.
Yes, yeah, that's part of what is true, and what we may be ignoring is what that means. What is impermanence and what is interdependence? And I defined it a little bit. We'll define it a little bit more as we go along. But again, the fact that we don't see interdependence so clearly, it's this, I call it life energy, that what we depend on is what we can see. And we're saying things that you can see are impermanent in a sense. It changes. But what changes is this energy. This life energy, and I define that life energy as another way of saying Amida Buddha, or the compassion of Amida, so that we just don't limit that image of Amida Buddha to the statue, this theistic model. And I think young people could relate more to that there is this energy that flows through things. And so, again, it's not an antiquated way of looking at life, but humans have done that for centuries. But now we're looking at things a little differently. Again, we wouldn't be able to have internet or all these other things if we didn't look at life from that energy level. Because that's only, let's say, that knowledge may be only 100 years old out of 40,000 years. So, and the question, you can see the truth through the third eye of wisdom following the path of Buddhist teaching. Yes, I think what they're alluding to is this knowing that things are, there's another level, and that's why, again, I love that shot of the galaxies, because the Buddha really had truth. When he was enlightened, I mean, this is a singular human being, and I think we should be so happy that we heard the Dharma from the Buddha, and that to have any thought of us gaining the insight he had, I think is kind of ridiculous. But as Shinran said, we have an ability for insight that we can receive. But what I think the questioner is saying is that there is a knowing. And for most of us, we may not know what that means. When I was younger, it was all Socratic, how do I make a decision? Positive, negative, And at some point, I got into, I guess, when the spiritual work, it's just this thought of intuition. And I started going more in that direction. I mean, is it a wise decision to become a minister from being a dentist? Financially, you have to travel, go to different places. And there's something that's going on that we can't explain. And again, that's at that level of deep truth that we can't talk about. That I don't think we have the equipment now to even do that. And we wonder why some people resonate with some spiritual traditions and other people don't. And it is in this area of energy. And I can't explain it. There's no logical way of saying, this is why people become ministers or priests or monks or whatever. There's just something. And so what the person's talking about with that third eye is this intuitive level. And so sometimes we have to make a distinction whether we're talking about something that's somewhat logical or in this area of intuition. And in transpersonal psychology, that's kind of a given. You kind of accept that as part of what we deal with, this whole area of intuition. And then I do vision quests with, we're looking for sites. There's a group of, 8 or 10 of us, and we're in different cars. And the leaders are in the car, and there's this other guy that was riding with them. He says, you know how they pick their spots? We drive to a spot, and we'd stop, and then, no, and then they drive on, so all the cars are following them. Go to another spot. No, drive to another spot. And so when we finally stopped and made camp, the guy says, you know how they decided on this place? Bill and Janine go, and then they sit there, and they look out there, and they say, no. And then they drive on and do that over and over. And then finally, when they went to this place, they said, yeah, this is the place. And if you read books like Castaneda's books, what's this thing? He talks about the right spot. There's something to that. And I'm one who's in that arena. I joke that I'm the mild-mannered dentist who's often on weekends doing this stuff. I have a friend who's kind of known, to be a little different and doing all sorts of things. She dresses differently and so forth. But we kind of are in that same way of thinking, except that I was the mild-mannered Clark Kent dentist looking like a typical YBA or, BCA member. But my mind is usually away, and I've been developing that side, this intuitive side. So there is something with religions and, that I think is powerful that we can't explain. And that's why I think this transpersonal psychology, we have people studying that, studying people and traditions, and trying to explain why that's a valid way of being. Now, the other question, are you describing human truth versus universal truth? Human truth is relative and malleable. Universal truth is more like physics properties, like gravity, except in the spiritual property of light, wisdom, and compassion. Yes, in a way that, I guess what we're saying is the truth we humans think we have are looking out the porthole and saying, I know the truth of the ocean. And the universal truth is the ocean. So, yes, Dorothy.
Maybe I'm getting confused, but that question that Porani asked, and I was thinking, and you mentioned intuitive, it reminds me sometimes maybe I happen to be present in a Zen Buddhist gathering where a koan was being discussed in a group. And the discussion led to, I don't know how it happened, but thoughts were being exchanged, and then there was like an aha, a moment of, you saw something that you hadn't thought of, or somehow this discussion led to that, starting with a question. I don't know what happens there, but maybe it happens sometimes. Is it like the Nikon method, which I don't know very much about? Is there some other level through which I know why, because it's not so intellectual. It's not in the head. It's not in your mind.
Right.
It's in you, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's
explain it.
Nikon. That's a little bit different, but I think that's what Zen does with these koans and such. It gets you out of your logical thinking. You say, what are these guys thinking about? And you get out of your logical thinking. What is the sound of one hand clapping? And you think logically what it is. And the kid comes up and says, that's the sound of one hand clapping. And many of us aren't getting that, but there's the sound of one hand clapping. So it is to get us out of our, normal way of thinking, because, again, words and even concepts are limiting. And I think that's where in Tanisho chapter 10, it's inconceivable, indescribable, and inexplicable. So it's just something that's deeper than that. And this is how fortunate we as humans have this ability. This is where we are spiritual. I don't know if other animals do that, and I don't think we need to spend any time speculating on other animals. But we have this ability to know ourselves, to know the environment. We have this ability to be awake. All other animals are aware of life and death and all these things, but we are aware of the value of that. And again, that's where thank you comes in. And Friday, I'll really expand on the spiritual part of what we're leaning toward. So, anyone else want to discuss as far as truth in Buddhism? Purani says, as explained by the Buddha and his disciples. I'm not sure if there's a question or. But anyway, yeah, truth is just this big thing, and I guess the reason I put it at the two levels is so that there is a level we can talk about, and then there's a level that is kind of beyond their thought, but is there. And the reason I put it that way is, I'll put it this way too, that's maybe controversial. This whole thing, our whole lives are spent in duality, right and wrong. In a sense, what Buddhism is saying is that's an illusion. You have to have the opposite. Why is good better than bad? You have to have bad. You have to have down to have up. There must be death for life to be life. You can't be, okay. And we think of, well, 51% good and 49% bad. But this is where, we talk about celebration of life and death. For Buddhists, we do celebrate life, but we bring up the grief, the loss. And that's real. And we don't want to lose track of that. So it's not that, oh, the person had a good life. Yes, we like to affirm that. But it's also to affirm our grief. And so it's bringing up all sides of the human experience. And I think that's so valid. It's full. We don't neglect anything. So, okay. Anything else? Anyone else want to bring up anything? So we'll get into today, and I'll just explain shortly what we're doing. I've written out, let's see, it'll be slide 2, I guess. Explain the human development. And there is a way, and it's not that everyone does this, but this is kind of a general outline of what happens. And again, in spiritual studies or transpersonal, we can look at things in this way. And I put it all down there. But what we'll be looking at is what happens in childhood and adolescence, and then this initiation in seeking and transcendence, becoming an adult, authentic adult, and serving others. So I'm going to start off by knowing the self, because again, in Buddhism we tend to, pride ourselves in thinking that it's about the self and that we know ourselves. So let me start with this poem by Kenji Akahoshi. And so I'll start with this poem. Look all around you. Take in the scene. Can you say for certain that it's not a dream? Forget what you know. You can't know it's true, except for one thing, the being of you. And so may I ask with heartfelt intention, what is this you that you always mention? What is it that's looking out from your eyes? What might be without its disguise? It's hard to pin down, and words can't convey it. Even the masters can't really say it. It's not that the matter is so complicated. It's simpler than all the words that might state it. So what do you see when you ask, who am I? To say, I don't know, would not be a lie. And telling the truth is a good place to start when you're asking a question that comes from the heart. But what do you do when you know you don't know? What do you look for? Where do you go? The answer is here. It's here long before the mind can begin to search and explore. The task of self-knowledge is not for the mind. There's nothing to solve and nothing to find. The question of who is something you feel. When you see what's not you and remain as what's real. So stop for one moment, be utterly still. Silence reveals whatever it will. Vast and open, limitless being, awareness, presence, consciousness, seeing. Remain as you are, as you've always been. Now, this is a very good place to begin. So that's who am I? Now we get back to kind of a practical arena, and look at the different phases. And this is useful because it kind of helps us see what our life is about, and this whole thing about waking up, and to see where we are. And it's not like we graduate one section and we never go back. In one school of transpersonal psychology that I like, psychosynthesis, it is about growth. And one of the things that I think Buddhism does is it doesn't talk about good and bad, and with the bad you kind of destroy and get rid of it. I think it's a matter of maturity, that we're looking at phases of growth. and that sometimes when we think of people acting in a poor way, it's not that they may be bad, it's maybe just that they're immature, that there is this thought of maturity and growth. And so anyway, looking at this, the first level is childhood, birth, infancy, childhood. And we talked about this is the age of receiving. And sometimes we think about children growing so fast, nutrients, their bodies grow. But I said yesterday, as humans, we also take in information, feelings, experience, all these things, values, and we're growing. Now, as children, what we have is what you might call a survival mentality. And, I think all animals or all beings tend to have this. And so you hang on to what you know is true. But then in childhood, you can see that when you go from 3rd grade to 4th grade, you let go of some of the stuff you learned in 3rd grade and you accept 4th, and then 6th grade. And then in junior high, you think about, oh, I was a kid in elementary school. And of course, in high school, you're like, oh, I was wrong. But sometimes when we get to adulthood and we're 30, and it's hard to let go of what we believed at 28. And there are some people, as we see, who might be 78 and still are acting like 18-year-olds. I won't mention names. But again, I think it's a progress. And if you look at it, it's like looking at a teenager. And you can, yell and instruct or do whatever with teenagers. And often, what do? They just ignore you. And so you have to wait until there's some growth. But anyway, that whole period is what we call, a survival mentality. It's just that, as humans, to survive, it takes certain things. And, you're building the ego. And so I want to define ego, and if there are questions, because sometimes we talk about, controlling the ego or containing it. But we want to build ego. You have to have a strong ego. And I'll talk about the next phase, but it is about building ego, having someone really know who they are. In psychology or psychiatry, if you don't have an ego, you're kind of crazy, if you don't know who you are. That's the clinical definition. Now, the next thing I have there, I think, is initiation. And this is when an individual realizes things die. And it might be a pet, it might be a relative, grandparent, or their own death. And it might happen at 14, it might happen at 30. But we go along life, and especially now in America where things are relatively safe and we have all these safety things with food and traffic and so forth, death is somewhat unusual. I think in Shindan and Renyo's time, death was very common. And so when we talk about Pure Land, what were they concerned with at that time? What was the major issue? Was it life and death? Yeah. I mean, I broke my leg last year. If I had done that 500 years ago, I'd probably be dead right now, either by blood poisoning or infection or not being able to work, starving to death. And so things that were talked about was what? Afterlife. How many of you were worried about dying yesterday or the day before? I keep saying, if I die, I'm going to sue someone. It's not supposed to happen. Now, I get a lot of money for it. It's secondary because the ambulance will come. Once I get to the hospital, I'll be kept alive through tubes and all these other things. But, and so now we're concerned with the quality of life. And so we're, again, this conventional level and this other, what we might call spiritual level. So the things we're reading not only is Amida and some things considered deities and, afterlife, but we're trying to translate that into our conventional life and saying, where's this Pure Land? Is it on Big Island? Not here. Would it be on Lahaina? It's just someplace else. Instead of a an experience of the mind, some image. And so this whole thing of initiation brings real life into perspective. That, I just had, older cousin passed away, and a cousin's husband passed away, who was very active. I guess he's mid-80s. But again, we saw him a few months ago, a very active guy, and then he's gone. And that kind of shakes you up. And so this initiation is this phase where death becomes real. And I'll talk a little bit about this vision quest. A vision quest is something that, let's say, nature-based peoples developed. And it may not have gone this way entirely, but a man named Stephen Foster in the 70s developed this program in the modern sense, developed from how Native Americans were doing it. And I first took classes from him and did it with him. Oh, I did it before that, but anyway. And that is that before, children would grow until they reach puberty. They didn't have teenagers. And so they would, again, at this time, have them go out into the wilderness to find their name. And what that meant was that they just took the barest essentials. And what we were doing, I had this program for our high school seniors at our temple in San Jose, and did that for about 10 years. But we just had a tarp. They brought water, no food. They fast for 2 or 3 days. And the barest things. And they were separated from each other by about a quarter mile, half a mile. It was to be isolated from each other. And the idea was that you would go out, and when we say call for a name, is to have nature respond back to you and find out who you are. And this is basically getting from nature what is inside of you. And as an example, I did several of these, but anyway, the first one was waking up at that last morning. I follow instructions very closely. But I woke up with the songbird, and so my name was Awaken to Truth and Sing Its Beauty. Does that fit being a minister? So that came from a songbird when I woke up in the morning, but that came basically from me. And this is how people get these names, Running Bear and so forth. But the essence of this is when you go back, you are no longer a child. You let that child go. And you come back as an authentic adult. But that adult is no longer a single person. It is an integrated member of a tribe, of a community. So you could be the warrior, or the cook, or the caller, or whatever. But you had an identity within the community. And so that's the theme of tonight. Who am I? And we'll be going to this thought of me actually being we. And I've got that poster. But that's what this vision quest is about, and it could be done in different forms. But when we look, what happened with Siddhartha Gautama? What was the first part of his life? Wasn't it receiving priestly life? And then what was his initiation? Going out of the castle and seeing a sick person, an old person, and a casket or a dead person, and then a monk. But that was his initiation. And he said, whoa, I'm a prince, and I had this great life, but, I'm subject to all these as a human. And so he had to, in his instance, renounce ordinary life and become a monk and search. And then when he came and became enlightened, who did he become? He was Shakyamuni Buddha, just this independent person. He was with this clan, but he represented all people. So he saw himself his compassion expanded. And so when I was doing these vision quests, I patterned it after the Buddha's life. And so that's what we're looking at. And so my question is, where do you think you are? And again, it doesn't have to be so chronological, but this is the question. And we may not answer, but we'll think about this and have you kind of share this. And again, it's not like, oh, now I'm adult and I won't go back. Everything, I think, is kind of in flux. And that we retain that childhood and we go back to that when we get upset or, things don't go right. But then there are also times when we become a wise elder, too. So just to let you know that that's, how this growth pattern goes. In this transcendence is, waking up. In a sense, that's what the Buddha did. It's not that he died, he transcended that he understood it and accepted it, as a matter of life. And of course, as he died, he said all beings died, and at 80, he just accepted that. But it's this sense of becoming an authentic adult. And the point I'll make in the second half here is that we identify with the group, and whether that's true or not, that's something that we can discuss. So let's see. And then what I want to do is go over how this works in our life in America. We no longer seem to have this initiation unless you join the military. And of course, in basic training, you realize, that's life and death. But initiation is not something you do at a college fraternity. That's whatever they do there. But it is this, becoming a member of a group, but it's in searching. Now, I want to just say a couple things before we move on. Number 3, let's see. Okay. I want to point out that, we can think about all these ideals of what we're doing. But what is common in all of, let's say, with most mammals, what's common? Is there democracy? Do people pick leaders? What happens in the animal kingdom? Who leads a pack of wolves or lions? The strongest. And what do the others do? Follow. So we may wonder, what do we humans do? Something similar. And, we're coming up to an election, and we talk about, there are some countries, well, how come those people are following? Which emperor built the pyramid or the Great Wall of China? Always we talk about the ruler who did that. Was he out there picking those rocks? It's all the slaves or the common people. And so it's us, the common people, that are doing the work, but it's almost in our DNA that unless we have this urge to become a leader, most of us are following. So to look at that, and I want to put that into perspective of what we're looking at in Shin Buddhism, in that not only are humans in this line of follow the leader, and the leader is usually, self-selected through power, but it's true, I think, throughout most of the animal kingdom. And so this whole thing about democracy, individuals deciding who the leader is, what we do, it is an experiment. It's only a couple of 100 years old. And that, we've been fortunate that even in the last 100 years, as I said, after my first 2 weeks of birth, I was in an incarceration camp in California. Moved to Denver or Colorado. And, our recent history of the 50s and 60s and, many of the situations, even more recently in the last 10 years. So these things that we think are unacceptable have been kind of the norm. And so I just bring this out so that we're not looking at things through rose-colored glasses and saying, well, as a Shin Buddhist, I believe we're all equal and we should do this and that. But there is within us this sensibility that we follow, and usually it's a strong leader, and yet we do have this system. And I think that's why Buddhism, I think, can flourish in America, because it has somewhat the same values and principles as democracy. And yet it's not something that just comes along, because there are forces that say, no, this is the real religion, or this is what we should be doing. Anyway, so I bring that up. I think we'll leave this to the second part. Any questions on what I just said? We'll leave it at a depressed area here. Any questions online? Because what we'll be getting to is, how we talk about things in America and how we could promote, how we see ourselves as individuals or as a group. So why don't we take a break and come back sometime within the next half hour.
We now take a break and then we come back at 7:15. So eat fast. Just kidding.
Okay. Now what we'll get into is this, how we, the method, as I was saying, is how we get our message across. So that's kind of the background of where we're going with this. And that we're doing some things in the way we share Shin Buddhism that kind of contradicts what psychology is saying. And one of those things is this, very strong emphasis on Nishu Jinshin, two aspects of deep mind. I did my thesis at IBS on that. And one of the reasons was that in this psychosynthesis, this one, he's a psychiatrist, Asajoli, has a model of the psyche. And, usually you have id, so ego, and then superego. But he has a much more complete thing. And in that, he has the lower unconscious and the higher unconscious, and then the middle unconscious. And that middle unconscious has the ego. But what attracted me was this higher and lower. And we talk about when you really admit your deepest ignorance, that's when Amida comes in. And psychologically speaking, in his model of the psyche, it's right there. And anyway, I did my thesis on that. It must have been okay because they gave me a degree. But I find that one of the things we talk about is this negative side of us. And I think that's contraindicated for Americans. As an example, I gave one of my first drafts to one of my teachers, Bill Plotkin, who's a deaf psychologist. He wrote back to me, and I use ordinary people in ordinary life, and he says, I don't know about using this word ordinary. Americans don't like to think that they're ordinary. And I wrote back and said, Bill, that for us is a step up. We usually are talking about people being ignorant and evil. And so ordinary is almost a compliment. But that's my point, that for Americans, I think we have to watch how we say things, because people who are interested in Buddhism are coming from where? Probably a Christian background, or maybe no background, but in Christianity it's that, and there's a large segment of people who believe this way, that you are a sinner, but fortunately Jesus or God will save you. And people are saying, that doesn't sound good to me, I'll try out this Buddhist temple. And they hear, you are not a sinner, you're ignorant. And Amida will save you. And then we wonder why people don't come back. And so I thought of a couple of ways that we might alter this, and which actually goes along with psychology. And this whole thing about the ego and trying to diminish it is something more akin to monastic Buddhism. And there's this element in psychology that says you can't destroy the ego. And again, Plotkin has this, what we call subpersonality. He calls it the loyal soldier who's protecting our ego. And he got the term loyal soldier from the World War II Japanese imperial soldier, because some of them hid in the jungles of Southeast Asia for 10, 20 years after the war ended. They were loyal. They didn't think that the emperor could lose. And so he's saying that we have this part of our psyche that's defending our ego. You're not going to destroy this ego. I will defend it. And so in order for some people to become Buddhists, they think that they have to control this ego. And psychologically speaking, that's a futile attempt. And some people are doing it 1 hour a day, meditating and trying to become a Buddha. But anyway, that's me being sarcastic. So that's just to show you the intensity of, when we talk in terms of psychology, how difficult that might be. One way we can talk about things are subpersonality. In other words, our whole being is not ignorant. We have what's called subpersonalities, and we can think about Star Wars. We have a shadow or a Darth Vader part of us that is evil and mean. And I think I'm one of the few people who actually encountered my shadow, and there's a process of doing that, and I would not recommend anyone doing that, but unless you're under good supervision. But there are parts of us that we have, a youthful part, a wise part, all these different subpersonalities. So we can talk about those rather than the whole being. And again, in Shinran's time, we had these negative traits, and so it seemed like, the person is evil or ignorant. Now, again, Japan has developed this, and so everyone is very humble. And so, they're bowing their heads, and it's okay. Yes, it's my fault. People are used to that. But in America, you said, if you accuse someone, no, that's not me. You got the wrong impression. I'm an intelligent person. So this is where I think we need to watch how we present things. And I guess I'm speaking to ministers here, and ministers' assistants, that approach on Nishu Jinshin is not a good approach in America, because American egos are so big and strong. It's going to face rejection in a way that people will not wait to hear what the next sentence might be. But we can talk about parts of us not being parts of us being ignorant. Now, another part is, about this ego. One thing we might do is expand the ego rather than diminish it. If you have, let's say, a poison, what's a good way of, not getting rid of it so much, but making it less effective? We can dilute it, right? Now, I bring up two examples which are pretty great. Gandhi represented all of South Asia, India, right? One person. And another example might be Martin Luther King. And he represented all oppressed people. So these people represented so much. So their ego was expanded. Can we do that? Can we expand our little ego to include others? I think so. Anyone have kids? Who's more important, my ego or my kid? Yeah, a family, right? We expand it. It's a natural thing that we do if we're going to be an authentic adult. So we do that naturally. And we naturally do this in other areas. If you have, when we went through school, go Bears. We identify with the whole school. I identify with the 49ers when they're winning. But we identify with companies, right? So we expand who we are with a larger community, a city, even a state, and a country. So we do this naturally. We may not think about it, but this is within our capacity. Yes, we're always an individual, but especially with a family, children, and even when they're grown, except when they're teenage. Those years you kind of put aside, but we're family. And Hawaii is great. I went to get some food, and the girl says, "Oh, hello, Uncle. Welcome." Yeah. I guess I'm at that age. But yeah, it's so friendly. Everyone's family. I remember in San Diego, we had this luncheon by the Alba, and they went to the Hawaiian restaurant, and meeting this guy from Hawaii, strange guy. I mean, no one really knew him. He said, "Oh yeah," and we're talking. "Yeah, you come to my house when you're in Hawaii." Everyone's so friendly, and we've done that. Met people on trips, and visited them here that I didn't know before. They were a part of the East-West Center. But anyway, so this idea of including others to expand our ego is something I think we can talk about, rather than trying to control. And we don't do that so much in Shin Buddhism, but in Buddhism you hear a lot about, I got to diminish my ego, control it. Gee, I'm sorry, my ego is showing. No, we expand it. And that's one thing I like about Shin. It's very natural that we know we have this part. But the other thing that I want to put forth is this middle path, that we're always in balance. There's an ego sometimes, there's a group sometimes, and we bounce back and forth. Sometimes we're authentic, giving adult, and other times we're a little, child saying, "I want this," or a teenager that says, "I won't do this." So we bounce back and forth all the time. But we have kind of a guide where we see where we've come from. And again, in this school of psychology, there's just this growth pattern, and I see that in terms of Shin Buddhism, that we don't eliminate something, we expand and we grow, it matures. If you read collected works of Shinran in his Kyogyo Shinsho, he has Ajatasattu and Devadatta as bodhisattvas. And if you know anything about Buddhism, these are terrible people, killing his father, trying to kill his mother, and yet Shinran calls them bodhisattvas. Gee, these guys should really go to hell and stay there. But no, in Shin Buddhism it talks about the compassion of the Buddha that transformed these people. So we don't get rid of it. It's a process of maturity, of growing, of inclusion. Of course, that's hard for many of us to do what the Buddha did, but that's a lesson, that it's compassion that changes people. And we could look at our prison system to see how it doesn't work too well. But anyway, that's, again, brings it down to the practical world on how we see things and, how we deal with matters. So that's two things that, how we might deal with things that we do naturally, that I really recommend that we look at how we talk about being bonno, having these passions, yes we do, and being bonno, being ignorant people, but kind of qualify that, because in America, it just turns people off. They won't hear it because of the background people have had here in America and what those things mean. Because it's very easy to switch, this person that they see in the altar with God or Jesus or some other figure, Allah, and say, oh, this is similar, but this is the Japanese version. And we often hear that Shin is the Christian Buddhism, which of course it's not. But anyway, that's just the practical thing that I think we could look at when we, share our thoughts with others. And again, this is with our children too, because, the word is, we don't need religion, and hopefully I can bring up some points by Friday that may indicate that, all of us could use that, especially the young people, because it's not just about this afterlife, it is about how we deal with life. And that there are certain things that we think are true, like achievement, when in fact it's more receiving. And that rather than gaining things, it's that we are grateful for what we have. And the proof of how that works, again, are the Issei and Nisei, especially after World War II. How did the whole community respond? With very little anger. I mean, there's pent up things internally, and this goes on for generations. And I don't know if Satsuki Ina's been here, but she's kind of the expert on, post trauma, intergenerational trauma. But this goes on for many generations. So now, okay. Now, what we're saying here is these things we've talked about. I know I kind of ramble on. We talk about different things, but these are things that we can share with our children. And another way to promote what Shin Buddhism can help with is this growth, this thought of growth. And I point to what Shinran has written in Matto Sho, and I'd like to read that, because growth is something that I think people can accept. And he says this, there was a time for each of you when you knew nothing of Amida's vow and did not say the name of Amida Buddha. But now, guided by the compassionate means of Shakyamuni and Amida, you have begun to hear the vow. Formerly, you were drunk with the wine of ignorance and had a liking only for the three poisons of greed, anger, and folly. But since you have begun to hear the Buddha's vow, you have gradually awakened from the drunkenness of ignorance, gradually rejecting the three poisons, and come to prefer at all times the medicine of Amida Buddha. Let's see, the next slide. Okay, so what we're talking about is having a positive approach to Americans, limiting the use of bonno and bombu, and as I said, being ordinary is not productive. I use the word ordinary a lot, but expanding the ego self to Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and this again is me to we, that we are actually more than a single individual. And then the next slide. And so what we're talking about is the survival mentality, which I use as kind of identifying childhood behavior, and that we want to get to an adult behavior. And that, it's, again, what Shinran is saying is, hearing the Dharma, we can progress through this. And I want to interject one other thing. Sometimes we hear people say that we want to get back to childhood, being like a child. That's not what we're doing. Ken Wilber is a writer of transpersonal psychology. He's a genius. So although I try to read his books, I understand a little bit of it. But anyway, he has something he calls pre-trans fallacy. And he says pre-egoic, that's like being a child. Trans-egoic is that you don't return to childhood, you transcend it. And that's what happens, with this initiation and when we become adults. We're not going back to childhood, we transcend it. And so, it sounds a little, we're getting into a little detail here, but I just want to point out that we're not going back to a childhood, we become adults. And again, we don't destroy childhood, we just outgrow it. So we are kind of going through this whole thing of being an adult. Now, I know we're all concerned with young people and their children, and what they're saying is, I don't have time for temple or do what you do. And that it's important. And I know in college I mentioned to my dad, I'm thinking about maybe becoming a minister. And so he gave me the typical Nisei answer, Baka! Baka, idiot! Now, he was one of the real supporters of the temple pillar, but he was also the treasurer for 17 years. So in the 1950s, he was making the checks to the ministers. And so I went to dental school. But they helped me because they helped me finance all this education that I had outside of BCA. But anyway, it's this thing that we feel, yeah, our children need to be financially secure, stable in the conventional world. And yet, you know, our parents, grandparents, they went through the worst things. Lahaina, you know, it got wiped out. And so what is it that has enabled, you know, the immigrants to come living under the conditions of, you know, all the troubles they had, and yet kind of work through? There's something, and people often point at religions, and I think Shin Buddhism is one of them, that it sustains us. And I think it's this whole thing of the Nembutsu and what that means. You know, again, it's so deep, it's hard to explain. So, although it's important on this conventional level, there is this spiritual level. And the thing I delineated the other day, we have mass, we have our body, but another part of us is energy, spirit. And again, television, advertisement, it's all about the body. There's some about the spirit, you know, you can get smarter and so forth. But what you should eat, how you should dress, and so on and so forth, the kind of car you should drive. But we need to really look at that spiritual part, the part that we can't see. And that is what will sustain us. And if you look into the future, sometimes it doesn't look too good for our children and grandchildren. Global warming, all the problems that are with us, we hope will be, you know, smoothed out. But looking at the history of the last 100 years, I don't know what the next 100 years will look like. So it is this spiritual, or the side that we don't see very much, this interdependent side, that I think you know, our young people need to look at. Because some of this practical area is unsustainable. You know, we're just using our resources just indiscriminately. And now we realize, oh, there's only so much water, or there's only so much oil, and you know, all these other things. Of course, we're trying to make amends to that, but it's somewhat obvious. And we're now at 8 billion people on the planet, or something close to that. And I was just recently saying, oh, we're at 7 billion people. And now, just a couple of years later, I'm saying there's 8 billion people. And anyway, so I think there's a real point to be made to young people that the spiritual side is necessary, not only for the future, but how they deal with life now. And, you know, what we teach our children, that having a bigger house is not going to do it. These things are impermanent. Now, I guess what I want to get to here is the where are we going with this? And we hear this at all our services. And what song do we usually sing near the end? Ondok-san. And what is that about? Great gratitude. Yeah, gratitude. And to whom? Yeah, our teachers. And who are our teachers? The Dharma-su teachers? Yes. But everyone seems to be our teacher. And we'll do it until our bones be crushed. Japanese like to say it so, until our bones are crushed. But yeah, you know, and so we realize that we've been receiving this. So what do we do as adults? What is the next step after we say thank you? I think we serve others. And sometimes, you know, again, Shinran has said, I don't know good or evil as the Buddha knows. But that's being very pure. There are practical things that I kind of know what is good or bad. And that goes against, as someone was saying earlier, that there are others who are not so much. So I would stand up and say, no, we need to go solar, think of ecology, do some things at that practical level. And although we have this image of being not quite right because of our ego, and we have to wait until we die and go to the pure realm and then come back where we're authentic or we're pure, I don't know quite how that works as a cynical living American. And so I think after we say thank you, it's service to others. How do people feel about that? Is that being too assertive? How do you know you're doing the right thing? And we could be doing the wrong thing. What do temples do right now? I was telling Dexter, this editor of Lion's Roar, she's a new editor, and she was visiting San Francisco Temple because that's where it started. So I think she went there, and one of their people referred her to me. And so she asked me about writing an article, and she said, oh, maybe you could write something about Buddhistry and dentistry. and right away that tipped me off, okay. And then she said, now she just became editor, and you can look at Lion's Roar. She said, why do you have these classes for kids and, the sports at your temple? And I'm thinking, this is one of these convert Buddhists that in Buddhism, oh, there's a war going on, let me meditate on that, That, again, this idea that some Buddhists have of Shin Buddhism, that Buddhists should be meditating or should be calm and all this. We are Shin Buddhists. We are real people. What are we doing at the temple? We're educating kids. We have YDA. We have sports. We serve people right now. And we have Eco Sangha. We have, don't you collect things for homeless or, and we have these drives. All we're doing right now is serving others. We're doing it right now, and I think that's part of what we do. And the reason we do it is we say, thank you, I've received this. There is a cycle of interdependence. I could wait until I die and come back and do it right, but I'm going to do it as well as I can while I'm alive with my ego. And I think that's what we're doing right now, and that's what we should say that we're doing. And the thing that I think needs to pass on to our children, and I hope I can reemphasize this on Friday, we enjoy doing that. There's great pleasure in doing something for nothing, for a group. This is our group identity. I think all of you kind of identify with a temple or with Shin Buddhism. This is your group identity. And so I want one of the things to think about is, who are you? What groups do you identify with? If we're moving from survival to authentic adult, who is your, like the poem stated at the beginning. So this is what I think, you said something earlier about, we seem to be focused on ourselves. Well, to me, Shin Buddhism is really about realizing that it's we. When we wake up, we realize that we are part of a group. And that this is where, at our board meetings or meetings that we have when we have these arguments with each other, that's where it should happen. I'll talk about that tomorrow. Often one side leaves, I'll talk about that tomorrow. But this is where we should be arguing and honoring that your stupid idea is probably as good as my good idea. Because that's what it's about, this duality. And where do we learn to do that? Hopefully at the Shin temple, because sometimes it's hard to do outside of that. And our Shin temple should be the place where we could bring my smart idea against your stupid idea and be okay with it and come out with a solution. But anyway, and I thought Keith would be here, but I think he was right. He said the other day that we have a tendency to kind of sit back and not do anything. Yes, I think that's right. We're stuck often, in this, actually it could be that survival mentality and not wanting to grow. And yet I think that's part of what we do. In this awakening, we need to grow and expand our ego and take chances and, offend someone. And that, again, a lot of these things go back to culture. In Japanese culture, I don't think it's good to offend people. It's hard for me to contradict some people sometimes because although I say I'm not Japanese, my Japanese comes out. I was in Tokyo with Ken Tanaka one time, and I met him for coffee, and he and his wife were there, and so we're talking, and then his wife say, "Sensei, do you want some cake?" And my Japanese comes out. I said, "Well, no." And Ken says, he says, "He's American. You just have to ask him once." And then I'm thinking, actually, I would like cake, but I said no. But anyway, so I should have said, "Yeah, I like it." Yeah. So anyway, we all bounce back and forth with our different things. But what I'm looking at is that we're at a stage where, we've had this opportunity to hear the Dharma. We see that we're involved with others. And we may take a chance in expanding ourselves and doing something we haven't done. If we have a bucket list to see all these different places, that's fine. But that bucket list may also be, oh, maybe I'll go help with the voting process. Maybe I will go serve meals at, a shelter. Just putting ourselves out to feel awkward and, doing something we're not used to. And to be embarrassed and to raise my hand and say, "Oh, I think such a da-da-da." That, to be an authentic adult is to be part of the group and to offer, what ideas you might have. So that's kind of what, my thoughts are on that. So service to others, to kind of recap where we are, I think we start out with survival mentality, and we still have parts of that. And we move to this through a whole series, and it doesn't matter our chronological age. There are different things we have here. But we go to what I think is an authentic adult, which means we are an integral part of the group. All our lives has been about being included. Remember in high school when you wanted to be in that group, it was hard to do that. So we know as a human, we don't make it alone. You need to be part of a tribe or part of a group. And as Shinbus, we welcome others. And I think we show that at our temples. And so with that, we can feel secure in just being ourselves. And with that, it is the Nembutsu that says, "I'm okay just as I am. I'm okay just as I am." And so I'll finish with this reading. And then we'll have questions. It's a good thing I'm organized. Okay. And it was written, it could be someone from Hawaii, actually. It's a poem, and I think there's a book that was written some time ago, several decades ago, of, and I thought it was people from Hawaii, Nisei or whatever, writing, their impressions of being Shin Buddhists. And this is in Taitetsu Uno's book, River of Fire, River of Water. And it's called Sono Mama, but this is accepting ourselves as we are. It says, you, as you are, you're just right. Your face, body, name, surname, for you, they are just right. Whether poor or rich, your parents, your children, your daughter-in-law, your grandchildren, they are, all for you, just right. Happiness, unhappiness, joy, and even sorrow. For you, they are just right. The life that you have tread is neither good nor bad. For you, it is just right. Whether you go to hell or to the Pure Land, wherever you go is just right. Nothing to boast about, nothing to feel bad about, nothing above, nothing below. Even the day and month that you die, even they are just right. Life in which you walk together with Amida, there is no way that it can't be just right. when you receive your life as just right, there is a deep and profound trust that begins to open up. And so I think that's what we're all traveling toward, or actually in a position to accept. So let's close this, and then we'll have questions, and there are some questions up here. So please join me in Nembutsu Gassho to close this portion, and then we'll have just some questions. Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda. Thank you. Maybe we should save that after the questions, but anyway. Purani says, individualism as American culture values can be applied to practicing Buddhist knowing the Dharma as individual direct knowledge. Okay, individualism. Okay, I guess that's not a question. Pete Sensei, do you think part of our Bombu nature is actually part of a mammalian nature, such as falling into social hierarchy, caste mentality, culture? Is our limbic brain system part of our self-serving, protecting nature that we are trying to awaken a perspective that may be more mindful, truth-informed? Yeah, I think part of our limbic, our lizard brain, is active in a lot of instances. Again, I think I'm not too sure how it is with the brain, but I think it is that, we have a child. For me, it's easier to think in those terms: childhood mentality, teenage mentality, young adult and an adult. So I don't know if I can answer that. I think all of that is within us, and we haven't graduated above some of our, limbic brain system. And then Dexter says, could the sub-personality concept be described using the two-headed bird parable, the kind head and the grumpy head on one body, similar to angels and demons on one shoulder idea in Christianity? Might this connect with Americans? Yes, that could be, but that's just kind of two, good and bad. And I think what sub-personalities can do is that it gives us a range of who we might be. And so it's not just good or bad, but we could have different personalities. And if you were to have therapy, a therapist may help you identify that. But it's kind of good to know. I got to know my shadow, which is a unique thing, but that needs to be done under a pretty good supervision. But it helps me in knowing. A shadow is, to explain that a little more clearly, as children, we grow up, and the shadow doesn't have to be bad, but it's something that the family or the community feels is inappropriate. And so as children, we know, we shouldn't be doing that. And so we put it back. And within Bly calls it our black bag that we drag behind us. And, thinking about the shadow, you can see me and I have a shadow behind me. That's where we're hiding all these things. And we think it's back there, but then it pops out every now and then. And people think I'm a mild-mannered guy, and then I'll get mad at some point. Whoa, where did that come from? Well, it's my little shadow back here. I'm not hiding it quite well enough. So again, it doesn't have to be bad. It's what that society or family thinks is inappropriate. It could be like singing and dancing out loud. And there may be another culture, another family where that's fine, And so again, that's the kind of thing with the shadow. But knowing what you have back there is helpful, because when it comes out, it's not so much of a bad thing. It's just part of you. It's your Darth Vader that comes out. And so anyway, it's useful to be aware of these things. So.
Okay, so this question and answer time. Oh, there's one more question, Sensei.
Oh, okay. Decades ago, the late Reverend Nakamura mentioned that reciting Namandab helped him to recover from heart attack. At that time, I did not understand clearly what he meant by that. Attending this class, I can begin to see the meaning of his practice, his receiving the compassion from Amida directly in order to sustain his well-being. I think the thing with Naman Dabs is, as far as the result, it could go any way. You could say Naman Dabs and die. It just puts you, and I like to use the term settled mind. And instead of Shinjin, I was on the panel on Shinjin, and Reverend Hirano asked me to be on it with anyway, his wife, who's a psychiatrist. Anyway, I came from it from a different view, because Shinjin is always that word I don't use very much because it's so, scares people off. I like to use the words anshin, the settled mind, and Shinran uses that. And anshin is like if you're a parent and your kid is just starting to drive, and then Saturday night you hear them come home just before midnight and they come in, then you feel anshin. Or, any time that you feel settled, that things are okay. It's not great, but and I think that's, I like that word, that we can feel anshin. And I think that's what reciting Nembutsu can do, as was it Reverend Nakamura, it's just Naman, it's just the calming. Whatever happens, happens. I'm okay with it. And probably relaxing helped his medical condition. But also, if he passed away, that's fine too. Like this says, everything is just right. And that's where, and this is where, in situations, often feeling settled will help you get through something. In sports, they always say what you do is you relax. I remember when I was younger, you're ready to play football or basketball. No, the first thing you do is relax. Then you can respond. If you're tight, you have to relax and then respond. So Naman Dabs is just this assurance that I'm okay just as I am. And whatever happens will happen. So it's just this reassuring voice, and we could describe it as Amida's compassion, life force, whatever it is. But it needs to have a practice. We need to practice it. When you have CPR, it's not that you learn it once and then you jump into action. You have to renew that every year. And then when it happens, like a lot of different trainings, you just do it over and over again. And then when it happens, you just go into your training mode. And so it's like that. Just practice, practice, practice. And when you need it, it's just there. It comes out naturally.
Nothing.
Questions?
Okay, if you have any questions, I'll give the microphone. Or if you are more comfortable writing it, just give the paper to me and I'll read it to the sensei. Okay. Question session is open until 8:20, I believe, yeah? Okay. Going once. No.
Oh, Steve?
There was another slide that I think I saw it say something about to appeal to Americans.
Yeah, I think it's
There was
4.
another slide, if we could
Number
go
4.
back to it. So in order to appeal to Americans, limit use of bono or bombu. When I saw it, my heart dropped because I like using bombu.
Okay.
I'm an American from Hawaii, and when I first learned bombu, it was like a aha nembutsu moment for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of people it does work, but I think for a lot of Americans it doesn't work.
I'm an American.
Oh.
But
A
local from
strange
Hawaii.
one.
Strange American.
Well, I sometimes wonder when a minister uses that and they say, well, that was a stupid comment. I wonder how they feel. They say, yes, it was a stupid comment. You know what I mean? That ego comes out. if they say I'm a Bombu and they say, yeah, that's right, you are stupid, I think they would defend themselves. That's that shadow coming out and being the real them. So yeah, Alan.
Yeah, I think there's a place in the presentation of teachings where you use those terms, bombo or akuning,
Yeah.
and things like that. But they have to be very carefully explained,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In order for us to be able to respond to those words, right?
Yeah.
Because I've never liked akuning, the evil person. I have always been turned off by that.
Yeah.
But that's a little translation, no?
Well, it depends. Dr. Names, he's at Berkeley. He says, no, it could be translated as ordinary rather than evil. So I'll think of his name, and he's well known, but he's at Berkeley now. Buddhist.
Another sense is translation.
Evil. Yeah, I think that's the more common one, but
Any more questions? Oh,
I guess tied in with Bombu and the ego, for me, I'm far from being egoless, but the more I practice or read or discuss or talk about it, or reflect on it, I can see myself, how am I going to explain this, where my ego comes into play when I'm doing something. And as long as I can be aware of how my ego is influencing my behavior, then I can choose to maybe not do it because it's
right.
whatever reason not appropriate or whatever. But when I was younger, I just do what what I want to do, right? The ego tells me
Right.
to do. But as I become more and more aware, I think I don't know if that makes
yeah.
sense.
I
Being
guess
aware of it.
I should say what I'm saying is conditional. Most of what I'm saying is to appeal to young people who have moved away from the temple or people looking into Buddhism. That this sounds like a criticism, which it is, but it's borne out by the fact that people aren't staying and they're not joining. And one of the reasons are what I'm posting here, that for Americans, some of these things that are basic to Shin Buddhism doesn't work. Once they come in, then we could tell them what an idiot they are. But in general, we want to put a positive thing on things, and that's what I do. I talk in a very positive way about Shin Buddhism. We're talking about the benefits of being a Shin Buddhist. And one of the benefits is to not be called an idiot. But then once they are involved and want to know more about it, we can get deeper into it. But right now we go straight to what it's about. And again, in 13th century Japanese Buddhism, that was used, and that's how Shinran wrote things in Renyo. But it doesn't appeal to most Americans. So I'm just using words and thoughts that I know in psychology we find are contraindicated, for most of us.
But there is a place where to start with the Four Noble Truths, right? In terms of life is suffering, or life is inconvenient, or life doesn't go my way. That basic problem.
Right. And maybe I'll put it on tomorrow. I put the Four Noble Truths in a slightly different way, because that third noble truth is that nirvana is the extinction of suffering, right? The first truth. And I don't think as Shin Buddhists we think that way. I have it in a quadrangle, and I'll show it tomorrow, that we're in the middle. We're trying to balance first and third, dukkha and nirvana, and then the three poisons with the Eightfold Path. And so I think this balance is important, that we're not trying to eliminate something by getting rid of our ego, but we're always in this act of balancing, which is difficult. And some days are good, some days not so good. But and I go, before I was explaining that impermanence and interdependence is two of the three aspects or three marks of existence. And then I realized I'm contradicting what I'm saying in a way. I don't think we even have to explain that. I just say there are two things that affect everything. I was talking about the three bodies of the Buddha. My wife says, I don't think you should be talking in terms of that. Doesn't everyone know that? No, no. But anyway, I think as a minister, I take things for granted that people are aware of certain teachings, and some people who have studied know. But for most people, what's he talking about? Three bodies of the Buddha. And I might explain it, but again, it gets kind of airy-fairy. And talking about the three marks of existence, the third mark, to me, I use that third mark as consciousness, that we have a choice. And it doesn't fit into, the way it's been talked about. So I separate it, and I don't even include it as three marks of existence, which I've done for years. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying is I'm just finding ways of presenting Shin in a way that is applicable, that seems inviting. And it does help us through life. And it gives us a balance, not just the good things, but it's a balance. And that's how we need to present it initially. And when that person comes back, then, yeah, we can get deeper. Dr. Warren.
Yeah, so anyway, I hope on Friday you'll let us know how to do this very simply and efficiently. But I just wanted to respond a little bit to what Alan mentioned about it's crucial in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, and life is difficult or suffering. But I recall that Dr. Jeffrey Wilson, at one of his sessions last year or early, I forget when, but because he is a professor at a college and teaches, one of his topics is Buddhism, and students ask him, can you explain Buddhism? And he said something like, I always start off with Buddhism as being about joy of appreciation, gratitude. He said, I never start off with the Four Noble Truths. He said, because they won't return. So just something, I think, for us to think about.
Well, thank you.
So, Reverend Akahoshi, you're talking about how to speak to people who are not Shin Buddhists and how to invite them to the temple. But what do you think about the role of the language, Japanese language? Because a lot of things that you talk about are in Japanese, and new people don't know that.
Right.
And I think a lot of it, even for people who are familiar with Japanese, the nuances of the language is very hard. So, what do you think about how we're engaging the people who come to the temple?
Yeah, I like English, and I find that it was somewhat interesting. There's a group that promotes gay life, or people who are gay, and they've named it. And I don't. Here's my great Japanese. As I said, I went to Japanese school 1 month and quit. But it's Minna no, what's village? Mura. Minna no mura. Now, I guess translated, it's everyone's village or something. And I don't know why they don't call it everyone's village. Because I can't even pronounce it, or I can't remember what the name was. And I'm always mispronouncing Japanese. And I think, I'm a minister, I'm supposed to know these things. But I'm really for presenting things in English, so that we don't have to have that second step. What kind of group is this? Oh, it's for, anyone who's gay or trans or something. But then to have Japanese words and then have to translate it, I think is another barrier. Not a barrier. It doesn't open it up to people. So the other thing I'll say, and I noticed this was different for me, chanting in English. Personally, I don't like English. Now, talk about that tomorrow. The Soto Zen would chant the Heart Sutra in English. And that always confused me. No heart, no ears, no nose. No. When I chant, I just want to be in the chant, not really understanding. I could read translations down below and know what it means, but it is just being in that ritual of chanting. And I think, and I'll say this tomorrow, what chanting is about is interdependence. You have, 30 people coming in as individuals. First thing we do is what? We're together, one voice, different tones, paces, enunciations, and yet we're chanting. Not only together, but we're chanting what people chanted 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, maybe in a different language or different, but this connects us. This is our first, one of the first things we do at the temple is chant. And we could read and understand what it's saying later, but it's just that ritual. And before the chant and after the chant, in my little story with Corey, I say, when do we say the Nembutsu? After that chant, you feel so settled, and you can say Namo Amida Butsu, 5 times, and really just say it. And say Namandas. So anyway, that's my feeling on chanting, which I find contradicts what people do here. I guess every other time or whatever. But, yes, English. Other questions? Or?
Kind of echoing Joanne's comment, but I just got through watching a Dharma talk by Bishop Harada, and he was using those Japanese terms, And then it was kind of, I never knew like motanai, that it has 2 meanings. Yeah, one is don't be wasteful. The other is I don't deserve this. I never knew that part of it. And so, I realized you don't have to translate these things. You can just use the English to talk about, motanai in a very direct way, right? So, yes, but so there are all those kanji concepts that need to be. They're really important.
Right.
They're really important.
I'm really envious of the Japanese ministers because they put up that kanji and it has so many meanings, and I can't even do katakana, But yeah, so all that is very deep and necessary. And so I'm not saying don't use it, but just some of the things, like okage-sama. All these things are just embedded in the culture, and it's every day. And so you don't have to explain a lot. But here, yes, let's use the word and explain it and, the different meanings of it. But yeah, I think I really see when someone writes it in Japanese and gives all the different things. Wow, so now I know, I can't write it, but now I know what that kanji means.
So you can skip writing the kanji, but you still got to talk about the concepts.
Yeah.
I was, at 80 years old, I was just remembering that we had a family tradition when I was a kid where my brother and I would compete to be able to thank my mother for the dinner. Mama is a good cook.
Yeah.
And that's all it was. Yeah. But I never thought about that as a daily expression of gratitude.
Yeah, that's
Thanks.
Good.
Okay, any more questions?
I'm going to go back to what I said on Monday about it's hard to be grateful for people who are being bad to you. Mm-hmm. It's hard to be grateful for that experience of somebody attacking you or discriminating against you. So, but I thought further that it's a lesson for me. It's a lesson on how I perceive things. It's a lesson on there's more to it than what I think. And that, I think, is where the gratitude comes in after that. After that realization that you're being hurt, but there's a lesson in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that that shouldn't have happened, but I think in most instances, you find something that you can be grateful for, not for that person attacking. The example I gave the other day was my grandmother breaking a dish, and she says it's good for the potter. You know, yeah, and that just comes from a lifetime of thinking of others. We would be at the dinner table, and there's no shoyu here. She says, "Oh, I'll get it. I need the exercise." Everyone else is, my grandmother would get up and get the shoyu. Her mind was always that way. So, okay.
Okay, any more?
Thank you. Yeah, go past
Uh,
8.
I have one question.
Yes.
Since we got into this sutra, English and Japanese, and there's always been talk, since I became a minister, that they want to Americanize Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Is that possible? How can it be done if it's possible?
Oh. I don't. Well, like anything, it's a slow process. I'll give an example by Bishop Ogui, who was a past minister. He talked about Obaku Zen. Are we familiar with Obaku Zen? Okay. He said that we're familiar with Soto and Rinzai, and this was in the mid 2005-ish. He wrote this in the Wheel of Dharma, our BC newsletter, and also talked about it. He said he was visiting Japan about that time, and he went to visit the Obaku Zen temple. And it was very nice, very elaborate, but nobody was there. But when they did get together, they chanted, and it was very nice. But he said it was like a museum. And he mentioned that when Eizai and your Soto is who's in Soto Zen? The minister who went to Japan, went to China. Dogen, Dogen and Eisai went to China. They learned Chinese Chan, and they brought it back to Japanese Zen, and so it became Zen. And of course, it's flourished and it's come to America. But he said Obaku kept their tradition, and so in Japan, it's not flourishing. And his point there was that we need to Americanize Jodo Shinshu. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over 100 or 200 years. But I think it has so much to offer, and in bits and pieces, I think it will, hopefully flourish. And it's just that some parts might be in English. Some things may. It's going to look different. Like even Zen is different in America. And he started that minister's assistant program. And I think there was, some controversy of him being the bishop because he was advocating meditation, which I know Bishop Harada does now, and I recommend it. Because it doesn't have to be to achieve if we meditate. Like I said, if you have a heart health condition, often you're sent to an MBR place where you can learn this mindful meditation for health reasons. And so there are things that America has accepted as effective practices, mindfulness, meditation, and I think gratitude is that next thing. And gratitude is the basis of Shin Buddhism. And so, you see books on gratitude, but I think we need to own it and say, this is what we're about, yeah. And that's kind of what the book I'm writing, and it's what I'm writing is an entry level. And so it's very short. I say it's a guidebook, it's a primer, and it shortcuts a lot of things. What it means is that I have to write a second book to explain the first one. But for newcomers, it just gives the simplest things that they're looking for. This is, how it can help you. The barriers, why we do things. I talk about camp. That's one reason you don't hear too much about it, because this was our refuge for, Nisei Sansei. In 1945, the temples were our only refuge, where college graduates were doing gardening work, and couldn't get your homes back and things like that. And so in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that kind of mentality stayed with us. And now that we're in the 21st century, yeah, we're opening up a bit, but there are reasons for us staying kind of contained. But anyway, I think Shin Buddhism, the principles we have are very applicable. And as I said earlier, for democracy, yeah, it's very, there's similar values, independence, kind of valuing each independent voice, thinking as that we are a group. So that's the homework for tomorrow. Come and share which group you identify with. And it could be many groups. It could be a family, corporation, a sports team. But again, there are things we're thankful for. And now what I'm looking at is how do you identify your authentic self? Because we become responsible for different segments, and we grow. We might be a local, city council person, and it could grow into becoming vice president or president of the U.S. But anyway, we expand on this, what we talked about, our maturity. And so you just don't become an authentic adult and stay that way. You expand. As you grow in the company, you start off being a certain level manager and then, higher manager and so forth. So we can do that as Shin Buddhists, but who do we identify with? And often it's different groups. But I just want to bring that to mind to say that that's what I think we move more when we realize we're a group and we're not just an individual. But there are people who say, I'm the individual, you follow me because I'm the leader. So, we can think about that. So that's tomorrow's exercise. What groups do you represent?
Okay, I just have a follow-up comment. When Dr. Bloom, Alfred Bloom, was still around, and that talk about, Americanizing Jodoshinshi Buddhism, he said it might involve that painful process of cutting the umbilical cord from the Honzan. And all ministers serving overseas, United States, whatever, should have the Tokudo here, not Japan. What is your take on that one, Sensei?
My experience has been Tokudo should be in Japan. For a lot of Americans, just being in Japan, it's an eye-opener. This is what Buddhism is about. Buddhism in mass is Japan. We were, when I was in Tokudo, we were at what we call Denny's, near Honganji. I don't know what that restaurant is called. But anyway, we're there. It's a Japanese restaurant. But anyway, we're there. And somebody spilled a glass of water. And the waitress comes over, mops it, and she says, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. One of our people spilled it, and she's saying, I'm sorry. But just being in the country and having people being polite, bowing, taking, you can leave your purse somewhere and it's there the next day. So there's something about being in Japan and then being ordained at the Honganji. It's just, that's powerful. We're talking about, I think, Kyoshi, the second phase, at Berkeley or in the U.S. But that's my personal thought, that is an experience. And to kind of simulate it in Berkeley is not quite it, or in Hawaii. Going to Japan, you just see Buddhism, how it lives. And of course, there are things Japanese that I don't fit well into because I'm not so conscientious about bringing omiyage or, saying thank you all the time and stuff like that.
Thank you, Doctor. Any more questions? Okay, I guess that's it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We could finish the refreshments there.